Alright, today we're going to quickly look at the Delegates Guide. So you actually have a physical copy of the Delegates Guide, but this is just going to go over the Delegates Guide in different portions. So let's go ahead and go through. One of the components is the different organs of the United Nations. So we looked at this during the Model UN quiz, and so we briefly looked at it. So here you can see the United Nations headquarters in New York City. So the building on the left side is the General Assembly Hall. The taller skyscraper building on the right side is the Secretariat building of the United Nations. So the first body of the United Nations is the General Assembly, and all 193 member states are part of the General Assembly. Now, every single nation has a vote, so it's very equivalent to our House of Representatives, where everyone has a say during the General Assembly. Actually, every September when they open the Assembly, you have all the world leaders speaking in the General Assembly Hall, giving their state of address, so they'll be able to address the entire body of the United Nations. To remember the main committees of the General Assembly is really easy, because it's first committee, second committee, third committee, fourth committee, fifth committee, and sixth committee. So in order here, so first committee is DISEC, or Disarmament and Security. Second committee is Economic and Financial Committee, so obviously with economics and finance. Third committee is SCH, or SOCUM. It's Social, Cultural, and Humanitarian Issues. Okay. Fourth committee is Special Political and Decolonization. Fifth committee, you're not going to see at a UN conference typically because it's budgetary, so it's really difficult to have debates and discussions on that, especially when you have to look up all the financial data and expectations. And then sixth committee is a legal committee. So one of the things I talked about at the beginning of the class was that there's something for everybody, and so there's a variety of committees that you can see just in the General Assembly main committees. So disarmament and security with weapons and things like that. You could talk about business and finance and economics. You could talk about the environment. You could talk about humanitarian issues and the rights of women and children, etc. Within the humanitarian committees and third committee. Political is very similar. If you like first committee, you probably like fourth committee because you're dealing with conflicts between countries and things like that. And the sixth legal is ones who like the judicial or more law direction of things. We're going to talk about the documents and the legalities of different things that are being discussed in General Assembly. Now, there's more committees that connect and are addressed in the General Assembly, but these are the six main committees of the General Assembly. Now, the Economic and Social Council is another organ of the UN, and there's only 54 members that are members of the Economic and Social Council. And obviously, they deal with social and humanitarian issues. They also deal with environmental issues. So what third committee does, SOCUM, in the General Assembly, it's very similar to what you're going to see in ECOSOC. So you might deal with environment, so UNEP and UNDP. You might deal with children's rights. You might deal with development. You might deal with tourism. Now, whatever's discussed in ECOSOC is potentially going to be discussed in the full General Assembly, but ECOSOC is going to be more focused towards these issues, and this is actually the one area that the United Nations has been the most successful in. Now, a lot of the meetings of ECOSOC or connected to ECOSOC actually meet in Geneva, Switzerland at their second location. All right. Next, we have our Security Council. And Security Council is the smallest organ of the United Nations, but it's actually the most effective and impactful in terms of whatever they pass in the Security Council actually becomes law, and so they have to enforce it, or actually becomes enforceable. So they're going to be able to enforce, and the members of the United Nations need to follow the decisions of the Security Council. Now, out of these member nations, how many do you think are permanent? Okay, so out of these 15, 10 are elected, so they rotate every couple of years, they get voted in, and they are equally distributed, representing all the regions of the world. And then there's 5 countries who are permanent members. Who do you think those 5 permanent members are? And just remember, the United Nations was created in 1945. It's an important date. It's after a specific conflict that you could think of. And the 5 countries who are permanent members were victors of that conflict. So thinking back, obviously one, United States, there's China, United Kingdom, Russia, and the last one is France. A lot of people confuse that last one. They might say like Germany or Japan. When I explain it in terms of the victor portion, maybe not so much. But there is some discussion that maybe Japan or Germany and countries like that might gain permanent status in the future because they have risen to power and grown economically, and they're one of the main countries in the world right now, so we'll see that. But the goal of the Security Council is to maintain international peace and security. They're never going to go to war. They're never going to have a conflict, and they're never going to create a conflict. They're going to go in, and so if you see the blue helmets, for instance, in this picture, they're actually going in to maintain peace. They're not going to go out into a war situation. Next is someone who might be interested in more the law aspect or even becoming a lawyer is the International Court of Justice. So this body is actually not located in the United States either. It's located somewhere else. So can you guess where this is located? So a lot of the guesses, maybe Italy, maybe Switzerland, where Geneva is. I've gotten France. But the International Court of Justice is actually in The Hague in Netherlands. And there's actually this huge MUN conference there that I've always wanted to go to. But if you are a member of the ICJ, you actually get to be a justice, and you discuss things, and you get presented by lawyers the case that's there. Now, let's not be confused though. The ICJ deals with conflicts between states or states and organizations. So, for instance, a state and organization case may be Yugoslavia versus NATO, where there's bombings occurring, and so they're focusing on putting the fault or blame on NATO. Or country versus country conflict, so maybe a border conflict of some sort or something like that, the International Court of Justice will deal with. So if there's a criminal, for instance, like a terrorist, they're not going to be sent to the International Court of Justice. They would be sent to possibly the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, which is not an organ of the UN, but it worked with the UN. But usually individual criminals are sent to like tribunals or tried in the country themselves. But the ICJ deals specifically with state-to-state cases, which is one of the reasons why it's an organ of the United Nations and created in the original statute or the charter. And then the Secretariat. So the Secretariat is the largest organ of the UN with tens of thousands of workers stationed all around the world. So one of my friends, their parents actually work for the UN, they're diplomats, and they work as part of the Secretariat. And so they are stationed elsewhere. I think they're either stationed in Africa, or they might have moved to Latin America, or vice versa. They were in Latin America and moved to Africa. But in any case, they work on the ground level. Some of them work here in the office building in New York, but then a lot of them will be stationed elsewhere because of a lot of work that the UN does around the world. They are headed by the Secretary General, and so no matter what, the Secretary General is kind of the head honcho of the Secretariat, and they're doing a lot of the legwork that the UN, the General Assembly, or the organs of the UN discuss and they pass. Now, there's one more organ of the UN that's not really publicized as much, and mainly because it's not being used. It's a Trusteeship Council, and the Trusteeship Council is something that exists, but it's not being used because there's no countries that are transitioning. So it was created in 1945 when a lot of these territories were either not part of another country or were looking to possibly transition to becoming an independent nation. So the Trusteeship Council helped guide them towards that independence or help guide them towards becoming part of another nation. So it doesn't regularly meet, but if ever the case rose up that they might need a transition going on, then the Trusteeship Council will be called on to meet. So right now the Trusteeship Council rooms being used for different meetings that go on within the UN building. Now, this is one of the last territories that was transitioned. So this is Timor-Leste or East Timor in the background. So now focusing on the Delegates Guide itself more so. One thing is that as we go over this next section, this is the area where people tend to get lost or they feel like they're clueless on what's going on. And don't worry, that's why we're here. So one, if you ever get lost, you can ask me. But if you don't feel comfortable asking me, you can ask your IAs or your DAOs, and you have their contact information in the main doc. But through this whole process, we are going to take it step by step. So after each section, make sure you ask questions, because if you don't ask questions, you're going to get more lost, you're going to get more confused. So don't put yourself in that situation and ask questions when you get the opportunity to. So what's going to happen is pretty soon, the Secretariat's going to give us the assignments for the freshmen this year. And they should be doing that sometime this week. And so you're going to receive your country and your committee. Okay, so one, you can put your country aside temporarily. We're going to look at that a little bit later with country profiles. But you're going to look at your committee, and you're going to get an acronym typically. and you're going to go and say, what do I do with this? I don't know what it is. Is this my topic? No, your topic is going to be something different. You're going to use the committee name to actually find out what the topic is. And how do you do that? So let's go look. So you're going to go to CerritosMUN.com. So CerritosMUN.com. You can also click on the class website to kind of get to the same page. And when you get to that page, you're going to scroll to the top, and as you can see in this picture here, you go to where it says conferences, and then you're going to click on the drop-down menu. There's only one option, so you can't pick the wrong one. Okay. So after you do that, you're going to arrive at this next page, and on this page, you're going to go to the right side and click the Novice Conference. And just as a side note, if you're really advanced and experienced in MUN, you can, after you attend the Novice Conference, request to go to the Advanced Conference just for practice. And the good thing about going to an advanced conference is actually that you can have an opportunity to win a gavel at these conferences if you do really well, and it's good practice for you. So if you are interested in going there, that's an opportunity. The one good thing about this year is that because we're online and we made a deal with the other major schools, that MUN this year for these regular conferences aren't going to cost you any money. If you decide to go to another additional conferences that we may sign up for, you will just have to pay for whatever the conference fee is for those conferences. So the good thing about all this virtual conference stuff is that it is going to be relatively light financially. All right, so you're going to go and click on Novice Topic Synopsis, and that'll take you to this next page. And so one, you do not need to register. That is for schools who are coming to attend our conference. So there will be other schools that are coming to our Novice Conference. So you don't have to fill that out. And no, you do not have to pay a delegate fee, so don't worry about that. So don't ask me, oh, Mr. Watt, where do I pay the delegate fee? So you don't have to take care of that. So you'll see these icons here. If you scroll down, you'll see this larger set of icons. And underneath each one is the acronyms for the committees. So you're going to match up what you got assigned to what's listed here. And we're going to actually reduce the number of committees that are here based off of the number of delegates that are coming to the conference. So there may not be this many when you go look up your committee itself. So be very careful, look at it carefully that it matches your committee, and you're going to click on the icon that matches your committee. So be careful that you select the right one. So when you click on it, you're going to arrive at a new page. This new page will say at the top your committee. So make sure your committee matches this. You see the picture here. This is your director, and so that is the person you're going to be looking for when you get to committee. That's also the person who's grading you at the conference, and it's the person who wrote the paper. So be careful when you do research and you write your papers that you don't just copy the information there, because the person grading it is the person who ultimately wrote the paper for your committee. So you'll read the introduction. If you have any questions for them, you can email them. Their email address is there. But what you're going to do at the top is click on what's called Topic Synopsis. The topic synopsis is going to be a summary of what your topic is. And so this is how you find what your topic is. So if I click, I'm going to go and open up the document for it. It's a PDF. So it's going to be DISEC, or First Committee. Okay, and that's the acronym, and that's a full spelled out. The top is a full spelled out of your committee. The bottom is the acronym. But if you look at the bottom of the page that's circled, it says topic, peaceful and sustainable uses of outer space. That's your topic. So don't confuse it, because a lot of people say, oh, my committee is peaceful and sustainable uses of outer space. No, that's your topic. The committee's at the top, the topics at the bottom. And so you have to be really careful to make sure you have that straightened out. Okay. Now, when you read your document or your topic synopsis, there's going to be a lot of good information to explain the problem, what's been going on with the problem, even positions for the blocks. But two things I want to point out. One is questions to consider. You want to look carefully at those questions, because as you do your research, you want to make sure that your research answers those questions. Now, your job is not to answer those questions specifically, but if you can't answer those questions after doing your research, you might need to do a little bit more research, because those are the main questions that you're going to look at. On the right side, you see your sources. So a lot of people, they only research looking at the topic synopsis. The problem is, if you only do that, the only information you're getting is from there, and your chair is going to be like, they just copied my topic synopsis. Well, one good way to start and use that topic synopsis is they used a lot of sources here. So use those as starting points for your research. Go to those sites, and from there, you can actually visit other sites based off the information you find on the sites that are listed in your topic synopsis. But use those to your advantage. Those are good ways to start your research. And again, that's not all your research, but to start it. So after you look through the topic synopsis, what do you do then? You research, okay? And one of the things about researching is you're going to pace yourself. So do a little bit of research at a time. And I think it's going to be really helpful for you to pace yourself. And that way you're not overwhelmed right before our papers due or something else is due or the conference comes up. All right, so one thing is you could start with sites like UN.org, or if your committee is like UNICEF, UNICEF has its own website. Now, if you're in first committee or second committee, third committee, etc., they don't have their own website. That's UN.org. Okay, but if you have a committee that's outside of the mains of the UN, you might be able to find a website for them. So you can first search, does my committee have a website? If they do, use that as a good source and a first place to start, because those are all going to be reliable sources. Otherwise, you could pop over to Google. And one of the things about researching is that you have to play with the words. You can't just say, type in your topic straight. Now you can try that. So in this case, I use refugee crisis in Syria. So I can type it in parentheses and say refugee crisis in Syria and see what pops up. But if nothing pops up, I can try different combinations. I could type in UN, refugees, Syria. And I can just play with the words, and maybe I just say refugees in Syria or something like that and see what I can find. The reason why I type UN there is because then it'll be more specific to United Nations, or I could type United Nations in parentheses, for example. Now, when you get your search results, make sure your resources are reputable. We live in a time, a day and an age where all these resources, some of them are very questionable. People can create their own websites. So be careful, one, you don't find a blog. Be careful it's not a website that's just someone created to make it look real and authentic, but it's not. 3, definitely don't find something that's called satire, which is pretty much they make up truly fake news on purpose to make it kind of comical or funny, but they do it in a serious tone. So The Onion is a site that, somebody had found an article in The Onion and said, oh, look at how real this is. And it actually wasn't a real article. So you have to be careful that you look through carefully these websites to make sure that the sources are reliable sources. Now, oftentimes they say don't use Wikipedia as a source. It's actually a good jumping point to say, what is this topic? And so you can read a little bit about it. So let's say your topic was xenophobia, as we talked about before. So for xenophobia, you don't know what it is, you type it in, and you get the basic information. But what Wikipedia is good for is the sources, because one, okay, Wikipedia, anybody can go onto the site and create a Wikipedia page or edit a Wikipedia page. So I had my own Wikipedia page for maybe a week or so before they emailed the person who created it and said, this person's not significant enough. That was me. I didn't create it, but it was about me. Sad for not being significant enough. But in any case, one of the things is if I make an edit to a website, I have to cite that information with resources. So at the bottom of every Wikipedia page, there are a huge number of resources you can look at, and possibly you could find some good information in those websites and things that you can use for your research. Again, as I mentioned before, avoid personal blogs or things that are biased. So you can use things that are biased, but make sure you have both sides of the issue or that the bias matches what your country wants. Okay, and I'll talk about that later. Look carefully and really think, is this reliable? So investigate it, look carefully. Don't just take it and assume it's going to be accurate. Okay, if you have a question about it and you're not sure, ask me, ask an IA, ask a DAO. Okay, and just say, you know what, I found this site, I wasn't sure if it's reliable or not, so can you take a look? All right, so during class, I'll make sure that there's time if you have questions about research that we can ask them. But now I'll move on to debate and speech. So we're going to look at general debate. So for general debate, what it is, it's the first part of a conference. And the main thing is it's like an introduction. So you're going to introduce yourself to the committee with a speech. You only give one general debate speech per topic. So if you have 2 topics, you give 2 general debate speeches. At this conference, you only have 1 topic, so you're only going to give 1. Typically, there's 60 seconds each. And what do you do during this general debate speech? You introduce your policy. So I often compare your general debate speech to an icebreaker introducing yourself to a bunch of people. This is your opportunity to say, hey, my name is blah. In this case, you're going to say my country is, and you're going to tell us, what your stance is. So in the United Nations, you're going to say, we support this. or we're against this, or these are the ideas we have to support this. Okay, in a real life situation, the comparison or equivalent is, I like this type of music, or I like these type of movies, or these are my favorite animals. And then you find people who are alike and you form groups. And so in general debate, we're going to be forming groups based off of which countries have the same policy. In real life, it's who has the same interests as you. So you're going to introduce with policy. You could talk about your country or UN involvement in the past. You could talk about different statistics, important events, documents, and committees, how it's impacted the world. But the one thing you cannot do during general debate is you cannot propose any new solutions. In general debate speech, we talked about how to create a good speech, and this is where you're going to implement that. Okay, you want to open with a quote, a statistic, an anecdote, a story that you can draw people in emotionally, but essentially bring them into your speech. So if you want to use a hook, that's perfectly fine. The main thing is keep it interesting, but also keep it professional. So you have to keep that balance between the two. You can keep it all professional, but just make sure you're not unprofessional, because that's one thing you don't want to do, and it's definitely going to lose you points in the long run. The other thing too is make sure you work on the presentation. So tonal range, you want to be interesting, again, without being unprofessional, but keep the tonal range and draw people in with your speech. Don't bore them to death. Don't be monotonous and have that monotone throughout your speech. And really emphasize some keywords within your speech. Have your introduction and draw people back in with your conclusion, and make sure people know exactly when you start and you finish. And then also be very clear on your policy, so make sure that people know exactly where your country stands. Okay. And so for general debates, we're going to look quickly at the delegates guide. So delegates guide is page 17. We can look over it very quickly and discuss some of the main points within the delegates guide. Okay, for the speech itself, you're going to look at strictly country policy. So you want to introduce yourself so other countries know exactly who you are. Remember, this is your first impression of who you are in committee. So if you're dynamic when you speak, people are going to get drawn to you. Okay, so you want people to notice who you are and say, I want to work with you. And so that's what you want to get people to say. Okay, remember, you're speaking from your country's point of view, so it's never I anymore. It's Bangladesh believes that. So you want to make sure you speak from your country's point of view and not from there. So you're going to speak in this third person kind of position. Okay, you want to talk about how your country's involved, what they've done in the past. Make sure, again, it's past things, not ideas that you have for the future. But at the same time, you don't want to tell me, what is the definition of my topic? Because everyone's going to have done research on your topic. So you want to introduce something new that they haven't seen, maybe a new document, maybe new organizations, maybe new programs that have already been used. Again, remember, don't introduce new things, but talk about what's been done in the past, but beyond maybe what was talked about in the topic synopsis and things like that, or that other people have brought up. So if you just give me background, then everyone's going to be bored because they're like, I already heard this, already read this. Introduce something that they may not have heard before. Remember, you only give one chance to do this. So an example of this general debate speech is, the problems of world poverty have reached far and wide, with the country of Bangladesh fully realizing the effects that poverty may have. Bangladesh is one of the many countries who have been hit hard by these effects, with a GDP of 2,000 USD per capita in 2005. In 1945, the International Monetary Fund, okay, and if I continue on with that speech as is stated here, it'll go over a number of different things, a number of different topics. It'll mention a UN document later on in this speech, but essentially I have my introduction, and then it comes back and brings back in the conclusion, with the last lines being, may we as a committee hope to stay true to our pledge to the MDGs and help rid the world of poverty. So I come back and I bring it back with this kind of closing sentence, and you can even have it more impactful than it states here. Okay. So what else can you include in your general debate speech? As I mentioned, statistics, historical events, past UN actions, organizations and documents that are important, and things like that. So that's just general debate in a nutshell. We'll talk about what informal caucus during general debate is like and what informal caucus is, period. But as far as the introduction to this, that's going to be it for general debate. And so if you have any questions, you can ask me in class, come to office hours, or send me an email or talk to the DAOs or IAs. All right, good luck to you. All right, so if you do have questions about the assignment, so you are going to look at the 3 categories. So you can talk about hamburgers, hot dogs, or more. And so more, just make sure you're not doing anything too specific or too kind of out there. You know, maybe a great food and things like that, but you want to have a group to be able to work with. And so if you pick something very specific or super fancy or things like that, or super distinct to a certain region, nobody else might pick that. So be general, maybe salad or fruit or vegetables, things like that. So you can pick a specific type of food and hopefully there's somebody that will match up with you. But even if you pick hamburgers or hot dogs, when you write your speech, you want to talk specifically about, you know, how do you like your patty cooked, maybe what toppings you have, how do you, you know, maybe have a protein style hamburger instead of something else, maybe a veggie burger. For hot dogs, you know, what kind of toppings do you have, maybe what kind of bread do you have, even the flavoring of the hot dog itself. You know, there's different flavors if you use a sausage instead, bratwurst and things like that. So you want to use this speech to talk specifically about the different items within your speech. And secondly, you want to write the speech, the 60 seconds, and when you deliver and record it, to have emotion. So you really want to have impact. So as I said before, you want to you want to draw the attention of people in and really get them to listen to you when you give your speech. So again, a 60-second speech, general debate, and obviously in this case, you're like, how would I include solutions? But no solutions. In this case, there's no way to do it. You're just going to describe, you know, what is the best in terms of hamburgers, hot dogs, or more, and why is it better than the rest. So you can actually downplay the other ones. Don't be too negative when you're attacking the other ones. Somebody might take offense to it. I don't know if they will, but you don't want to do that. But make sure that you can make yours look better and highlight it better than the other one. So have fun with your speech. Again, get emotional in there. Take some time to write it and record it. Practice it before you actually record it and submit it. And we'll look at them, we'll grade them, and then we'll go from there. So I will pick a few to show to the class. So hopefully they're good, and we'll see how they come out. So good luck with hamburgers, hot dogs, and